What I want to present today is actually slightly away from the perishable industry, but it's very, very relevant. We all experienced and have experienced, not only in Kenya, but globally, the change in the global trends in terms of air freight. So I thought I did this presentation in Berlin to actually try and demonstrate it's a pain point that we're feeling all the way through the industry. So hopefully you'll find it slightly relevant. So Panalpina, you know who we are. I don't really want to dwell too much on Panalpina. I'd rather sort of home in on the points that I feel are relevant. So the fresh produce commodity overview. What I've done here is show you roughly where product is coming. Traditionally, it's product from the south to the north. So 80% of the perishable food is imported by developed countries, i.e. Europe, etc. 34% of South American produce, meat, etc. is traded in Europe. And 30% of Middle East and African produce, again, is going to Europe. The reason why I'm showing this, there's a big shift going on which is going to affect all of us in this room. If you look at the top exporters and exports, you've got USA, you can see Kenya is sitting fourth. Again, as I go through the presentation, you'll see that whereas we've had traditional European markets, we've now got Asia coming into the fore, coupled with something called e-com, which is having a huge impact within our particular sector. The top importers and imports, again USA, China is catching up. Netherlands, traditionally it's a hub market, but you will see through the further slides that there is going to be a huge shift, and China and ultimately India are going to be the predominant importing markets. So consumption trends and purchasing shifts. At the moment, again, what's growing in the south? So you've got 80% of currently of food production is imported by developing countries. 34% are now, in terms of flowers and fruits, are starting to be traded in China. If you look 10 years ago, that was barely hitting the scale. And again, Middle East, African produced vegetable is now being traded in China as well. It will all make sense towards the end. And if you guys have got any questions while I'm presenting, please, I'd rather do it in an active way rather than just do it verbatim. So if you look at this slide, which is very, very important, that the middle class drives consumption. So you have your staple products. If you look at things like the bean business, etc., from Kenya, we would class that as a staple. But if you look, and I'd rather stand by one of the screens, if you look at where the shift is coming, if you look at China, where it currently sits on 2018, and where it's actually showing in 2048, and then you look at India, which is off the scale, China and India are actually going to dominate by 2048, and some of us may not be around then, but if you actually look at the global shift to where consumption is going to be, they are the predominant parties. If you look at Europe, where we currently sit, it's quite a phenomenal percentage, but that is actually being eroded very, very quickly. So the demography of customers is changing as well. So up to 2013, the traditional consumers are the majority. 2013 to 2020 is the digital converts. Now, whether you're trading in vegetables, flowers, hard products like fridges, high tech, etc., the way that people are buying is totally changing. And beyond 2020 is the digital natives. What are the digital natives? They're not going to the shops anymore, they buy everything on the internet. Now, currently in the perishable industry, whilst it's shifting, it's very, very slow, but the predictions are in the next 5 years that actually the digital natives will have an impact. They won't be going shopping as they traditionally do. Now that's, again, what does that do to perishables? To give you an example, over Christmas, which is traditionally a peak season, whenever, we as a company ship peppers from Holland and Spain into the USA. And generally, there's capacity, and we would pay anything between €1 and €1.50 a kilo to get it from Europe into the USA. This Christmas, the rates went up to €35 a kilo. The impact, I don't know if any of you have got children, but there's these things called whizzers that became very fashionable. You put it on your finger and you spin it around. Absolutely, have no idea why, but it's a trend. That was driving the peak season this year. So if you look at a traditional freighter, we run our own aircraft as an organisation, and generally a 747 is around, at Christmas time we would get 400,000 US for one way. We were able to achieve over $1 million one way. So what does that say about perishables? There's a lot of blood, sweat and tears that goes into perishables, and I think as Panalpina as an organisation, we talk about product empathy, and we have people like Conrad who sees it from both sides. We really understand the pain that you guys have to go through, not only from a growing perspective, but actually from an importing perspective as well. However, the reality is that perishables have always been seen as a low yield for the carriers. That's actually changed. I mean, I've been in the business now probably coming up to 40 years, and perishables was always considered as a belly filler, that if there was capacity on a flight, they would take perishables. Unfortunately, for us, perishables has seen increases in rates as demand has increased and the business has become more rationalised and, in fairness, professionalised. We had a meeting this morning and we're reminiscing on how vegetables used to move from Kenya and how that has changed. The dominance of the retailers, how they put more and more pressure, whether you're a vegetable producer or a flour producer, the lengths that you have to go to actually deliver a top quality product. However, e-com now is a real-time business, and consequently it has a higher yield. The carriers, for a number of years, and we've got a carrier who's joined us today who's going to take a Q&A session, so if you can beat him up quite nicely, you know, don't bruise him too much, but anyway, they have taken quite a beating over the last decade, and whilst we're all price sensitive, the reality is it's very, very expensive to run an aircraft, extremely expensive. And they're in business to make money at the end of the day. So, like anywhere, like you guys would do with supplying as market shifts, for instance, as I say, China is opening up for Kenya, etc. The airlines will go where the business is, and where the business is where the yield is. So that's why, if you've seen in the last 6 to 8 months, we've lost capacity out of Kenya. There's disruptions to services, etc. And that's because a number of the freighter operators have actually chosen to move their aircraft to other areas. So focus on Asia, Europe into Asia, again driven, unfortunately, by the e-com phenomenon. So if you look at the buying behaviour, that the 55 plus, that's my age group, very traditional, influenced by our parents, how we purchase, etc., etc. Then you've got Generation X, which is the first generation migrating into a digital age. And basically, they're a hybrid between digital and retail, but still they're traditional bricks and mortar will go shopping once a week, etc., etc. Then you've got Generation Y, which, frankly, if you've got kids, and we're all guilty as well, I look around the room, or you're out, we've all got our mobile phones out. We've got this desire to be connected to a virtual world. And there's actually another phenomenon called the indoor crowd, where if you look at Generation Y and partly Generation Z, and Generation Z are pure digital natives, and they communicate constantly on their smartphone or their digital device, and they are physically changing how not only we buy, but also how we supply. And that, as I say, is going to have a bigger and bigger and bigger impact as we go forward. So the modal split currently is around 2.5 million tonnes of perishables are traded by air freight, and 88.6 million tonnes is by ocean. And these are broad figures. But down the bottom you'll see 27% of the world's B2B, so business to business, will trade online by 2020. So again, that's right across the full spectrum of everything. I mean, as Panalpina, we're involved with automotive and healthcare and perishables, etc. So roughly speaking, as I say, 27% will go onto an online platform. This slide is extremely complicated, but I think the first graph on the left, for the first time in many, many years, demand for movement of cargo, be it perishables again or automotive, is actually outstripping capacity. If you look at recent figures, available capacity has only grown by about 4% in the last 5 to 6 years, whereas demand has actually grown 16%. So you don't have to be a mathematician to work out there's a shortfall somewhere. So then we go down the cherry picking route that the carriers will actually choose what they want to carry. Everything's cyclical, and it could well be in the next couple of years. The one thing that e-com does, certainly on the hard goods, is that they want to convert as much as they possibly can onto ocean freight. So at some point it could well be that the market softens again. But predictions say that's not going to be at least for another 5 years. So the challenges, I had a nice video, but it won't work. But it would show you how the kids think about buying things. So if you look at the perishable logistics, they continue to grow. We've got a rising population. Again, I referred to in an earlier slide about the middle class. The middle class sector is the most important sector for all of us in this room. They're the ones with disposable income. So if you actually look at it, where is the highest number of middle class with disposable income is China. China has a huge appetite for provenance. So it's great for Kenya, it's great for you guys because they're seeking out traditional supply chains that used to go into Western markets. And as the appetite grows, basically if the whole of the middle class in China decided to switch to a Kenyan appetite for everything, they could take the whole supply and more. And it's actually starting to create concerns because China in itself is a huge producing country on every aspect. However, the middle class Chinese do not want their own product. They don't have faith in it, they don't trust it. So future predictions are, it could well be for me living in Europe, that we could well be importing from China their product that they don't want, and the top quality product that you spent years and years and years working on will all switch to them. So it really is changing dynamics. So the food shopping experience is being disrupted. So yesterday, it was driven by a need for replenishment. So as I say, I remember as a child, every Saturday, going off to the shops, buying the weekly food, going to the greengrocer, dominated by local supermarkets. Fulfillment could take days or weeks. So if you went to a shop and something wasn't in there, you weren't that concerned. You have to understand that a lot of us now, and the younger generation, are so well travelled, and they believe living today, not tomorrow. So when they experience something abroad, let's say pick on the avocado. Avocado is very fashionable at the moment, it's a superfood. They want it now, they don't want to wait till tomorrow, they want it now. Retailers with influence limited by customers' time in store. So the retailer, if you look at Germany 10 years ago, and how little Aldi used to operate in Germany, they were commodity trading. So if the price of bananas was the right price, they would buy bananas. But if the price of bananas was too expensive, you couldn't buy a banana in a Lidl or an Aldi store. That subsequently changed, but at the end of the day, they drove and influenced what we were buying. If you look at the recent study on Tesco's were their own worst enemy in as much they gave us too much choice. So where Aldi and Lidl have scored is if you look at their lines that they run, which might be around 6,000 or 7,000 items, compared with Tesco's, which is 30,000 items, you can work out how things have changed and why Tesco's partly are in the position that they are. They gave us too much choice. So tomorrow, it's driven by impulse cravings. So, for example, if I was to eat something today here that I've never tried before, I have the ability to actually get that into the UK. And the impulse is that I want it, again, now. Everything is about now. It's transitioned to a diverse set of digital disruptors. So smartphones, iPads, the phenomenon of Amazon, Alibaba, they have created that fulfillment factor that you can touch the product, and that goes into the flower business and the veg business as well. As I say, if you look at the curve, the flower and the veg business is actually slightly behind predicted. But again, over the next 5 years, once it picks up speed, it will change dramatically. Fulfillment is measured. You all feel this. Fulfillment is measured now in hours or days and driven by customer preferences. If a customer wants a red rose, then when I was growing up, if red roses weren't around, you used to wait. Now, it's expected. And that puts pressure on you guys. Retailers' influence expands to every hour of every day and to every touch point. In other words, if you look at the delivery, I can only refer really to the UK, but China's a prime example. In fact, I was in Berlin and Alibaba managed to, from an order on a TV, managed to deliver it from the point of ordering to the customer within 15 minutes. And I'm not making these numbers up, these are real. Are we going to live in a society that creates a delivery in 15 minutes? No. But they wanted to demonstrate that they have now, we've all heard of algorithms, big data, blockchain. What they're able to do is they're able to predict the way we purchase. We have habits, we leave footprints on our iPads, our smartphones. They are getting so good now that if I go in, let's say I want to buy a TV, they can predict what item I am most likely to buy. Now, it's not 100% correct, but it's in the high 90s. So they already create the fulfillment in the anticipation that I want to have that TV. If you then think about that on a perishable side, that I've discussed it with Conrad and Peter, I see an age with Kenya that somehow there will be a platform and the consumer will order direct from Kenya, whether that's vegetables or flowers, and that'll be delivered tomorrow. If you order it by 9 o'clock in the morning today, there's no reason why it can't be delivered to the UK, in particular, the next day. So The reasons not to purchase online, it's so age-driven. We've had many discussions about, my wife, for instance, will not buy produce online. She feels that she's better positioned to see, to feel, to smell the product. If you look at the energy that the online companies are putting into on the produce side, so Amazon Prime, etc., actually they can't afford to deliver to the consumer a bad product. If you look at flowers at the end of the day, the efforts that we all put in from a logistics point of view, from a growing perspective, and then you go to a retailer, there's no temperature control, there's nothing. It sits there. It's an impulse purchase. But now the consumer is saying, no, if I buy a flower, I want it to last 7 days, 10 days. And so there's a lot of change coming from there. If you look at the age group, so we pick on the 15 to 34-year-old group. If you look at the questions, enough supermarkets nearby. In essence, they're saying there's too many. We don't need a supermarket. Want to pick fresh products myself? They're not interested. Why do they need to go and pick up a bunch of grapes or what have you and make a decision informed on nothing? They have no experience. So that's why Amazon and Alibaba, etc., and JD.com in China actually are investing in expertise to actually make sure the consumer gets the best product. The delivery costs are too high. The millennials believe that delivery cost is unnecessary. So they're putting pressure on the supply chain to get that cost down. The minimum order. The millennial doesn't want to buy a week's shop. It wants to live today or tomorrow. So I'm sure, I don't know if you have it in Kenya, but there's a company in Holland where Quint's from, which is a fresh gourmet. So what they will do, Samsung have just brought out a fridge that will recommend a recipe for you. And if you give it a command, it's just about to be launched in the UK, it will order the ingredients from something like Fresh Gourmet, which will be delivered to you by the afternoon, which you can then prepare in the evening. So again, they don't think about tomorrow, it's about living today. So if you look at China, I'll skip through some of these slides and I'm quite happy to share this presentation. What I wanted to do really is to demonstrate why we're here today, why is there pressure and change coming on the volumetric side within the industry in Kenya. It's one of the last to actually have that pressure point. If you look at how Colombia operate, there is, and has been for many years, actual weight and volume weight. I give an example is that if you've got a 10 kilo block of gold and you compare that to 10 kilos of feathers, which takes up more room? The flowers, the feathers. So if you look at it, that's what the airline needs to cover that capacity. So the challenges, capacity in transportation. We all know about Brexit. What's that going to do to Europe? What's that going to do to your industry? These are all the things that you as growers and importers or exporters didn't have to think about 20 years ago. You had to just focus on the bit. But these are all relevant parameters and dynamics that are shifting, and we have to be engaged, all of us. There's more pressure on cold chain. If you look at from post-harvest, there's been studies on the food sector in particular, between 17 and 21% of all produce after post-harvest is thrown away. Now, what's the relevance on that? That's profit, that's margin. But equally, with a rising population, that's food that feeds people. So we're going to have to get a lot more sharper on how we move product and minimise the wastage. The retailers don't want to admit that there's such a large throwaway. Actually, if you look at from consumer, so you can say field to bin, it's nearly 40% of all food that's produced from post-harvest is thrown away. So you've got 17 to 20%, which is through bad management, through cold chain, and then you've got the other, which is the consumer buying something, putting it in the fridge, and forgetting about it. Customers. The customers have an expectation now. That puts huge pressure on the supply chain. Matching supply and demand. Again, I refer to the big data phenomenon. The big data is that we're all creatures of habit. And we did a test as a company, unrelated to perishables, but it was a big automotive company that had supply chain management. So they were ordering in their bits that they needed, what they thought they needed. And then we bolted on a program called D2ID, which is a big data collector. And their accuracy actually was in the low 50s. With the program we bolted on, we got their ordering to 97%. What's the relevance of that? The relevance is, if demand keeps on outstripping supply, we have to get better on how we ship and manage product. And that goes from automotive all the way down to perishables. And the only way we can achieve that is to work together, because air freight, whether we like it or not, is going to become more expensive. So therefore we have to be sharper. If you look at perishables, there's a lack of experienced people, but Amazon are trying to change that. The speed and reliability of market. If you look at the recent service levels out of Kenya, last year, Conrad and I were talking about it this morning, with certain flights you knew they were going to land plus or minus half an hour, let's say, in London. Now there's unreliability. Why is that? One, because we all know that Kenya's going through a bit of a lean period with the weather. It's had an impact even on the low season volumes. So some of these airline operators are holding back as long as they possibly can to try and fill the aircraft. So my takeaway, and I am a huge advocate of it, all of us in this room have knowledge. And the only way we can overcome certain things is to actually share that knowledge and look at partnering rather than a service provider. So it's critical because, as I say, air freight is going to become not just more expensive, there's going to be limited capacity. So we all have to actually manage that. All of us are responsible for that. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Quinn, who's just going to reiterate about the changes that are coming in Kenya in terms of the volumetric side of the business. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Good morning, my name is Quinn Wilken. I work together with Colin and the team on perishables. At the moment we are, of course, facing some issues in Kenya with the new rules, and what we wanted to do, and I will explain a little bit the definitions of volumetric, and then I'll invite our carrier who is here to do some questions and answers for you guys, so you can also understand from a carrier perspective. Volumetric has been in the air freight industry for as long as we're here, but Kenya has been one of the exceptions where it has never been applied. And why? Because simply the business that were going northbound was always supplying the southbound freight that was going into Africa, and that was more important. So basically the carriers saw Kenya as a good way to go back to Europe, and they felt that they could take the volumetric on their own account. But with now the change that Colin already described on the capacity, that's becoming less. The fact that they have higher yields on other trade lanes, they now said, okay, listen guys, we're now in a driving position after 10 years of suffering. We're now going to make this count. Now, volumetric from the definition perspective is very simple. You have a formula which we can explain to all the people that don't know, where you can calculate what is bigger, the actual weight or the volume weight. And what a carrier does is that they give us a minimum weight on an aircraft pallet or any other unit, and they will charge us for that. So if we together do a good job, we don't get charged any weight that's on top of the volume weight, if we don't do a good job, we are missing some of the part that we have to charge out. So what Colin said already before, that we have to work together on this. This is also why we're having the workshop with the boxes, to optimize the boxes, to make sure that the packing rates are higher, and also to come up with other ideas to work together on really solving this issue, because it's an additional cost for you, but it's also an additional cost to us, because basically the whole industry is facing this. This is all about supply chain optimization. So if anyone has a question about how volume is being calculated, I'm more than happy to answer. Going back, it has been recently changed, and it will be across the industry. It's not one carrier that does it, everybody is doing this. It's not that we can change that, it's a generic decision by the carriers. Referring to the other big flour exporting countries like Colombia and Ecuador, it has been in place there for many, many years already. So it's not that Kenya is now all of a sudden being targeted to be, we have to get more money out of Kenya. It's more that it's a global factor that's now coming into play. So has anyone questions about the definition or how it's being calculated? No? Yes, please? You want is there a microphone? You have to make it work yourself, eh?
I think it will be good if you can explain in 2-3 minutes how the formula works to get to volumetric weights.
Okay. Now, coming from a metric system, meaning we work in, I'm Dutch, so we work in centimeters. Now some of the Dutch guys know what I'm talking about. It's the length times the width times the height of the box. You calculate it in centimeters and then you divide it to 6,000 and you come to a weight. And that weight is, if it's higher than the actual weight, it's volumetric weight. Again, I think that for some of the people here, they're very known to this definition and to how it works. For the people that are not known to this, more than happy after the workshop or when we are divided in 3 groups to go into more detail. I think what is more important besides understanding the formula and how it works is how we can tackle this problem. And that we have to work on optimizing, it's a cost. So we were talking about doing, trying to get the handling cost down, and that's also why we have the working session, but the volumetric is as much a cost factor in this as how to pack and make sure that you have less damage on your flours arriving into the markets. Any more questions? Yes? Can you? Yeah?
Thank you. I would like to ask the question on the formula.
Yes.
The formula you have to get the volume, then you divide by 6,000. Sometimes if I Google through the internet, I get to divide by 5,000. So the question is, why did we arrive at 6,000? Why you divide by 6,000?
Now, that's a good question that that the airline also will answer. There is different factors in this when it comes to volumetric. For perishables, it's 1 to 6. That's why it's divided by 6,000. You have different volume metric formulas for different products, but that is connected to rates and service levels. But in perishables, the general formula is 1 to 6. So that's what I explained to you. And if you go to internet, which you have done, you probably, and if you can show me, I can even explain to you more why that information that you got is applicable to something else, or to a special agreement on a certain trade lane, on a certain different product than perishables. Any more? Yes? Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm sure you're going to touch on it later, but
If you have 2 seconds.
hi. I just have a question about not specifically the volumetric per box, but how the airway bill would work on a holistic level on a pallet. If I have boxes that are not fitting onto a pallet and then get mixed with another pallet from a different farmer, is there going to be like a general airway bill for the carrier, and how is that going to work towards being billed as a grower?
What is happening right now, to answer your question, is that when all the boxes that arrive at Panalpina Airflow are being scanned and being sort of, the volumetric is more or less calculated on box level. So what we do afterwards, how we build the aircraft balance, how we make up the air bill, that's on our account, that's our specialty. We have to make sure that we make it work. So you are not suffering from somebody else's volumetric in a negative way. So it's done on an individual way. So, but that's coming to a very interesting point, by the way. If you as a shipper, grower, have done a good job of volumetrics, you already have been incentivized by that automatically. Because your packing rate is higher, and therefore, of course, you get more flowers into a box, which means, in the end, in the market, it's better, on the cost level, but also from a freight perspective, it's also better. So, to answer your question, it's an individual thing. If you are a big shipper, if you have a complete ULD that you can fill, you will benefit from that too. Okay. More questions? If you have questions that are sort of coming up in the course of this workshop, please feel free to approach any of the Panalpina staff that is here, because they are very well versed on this. Now, in this case, I want to ask Wouter Bouquet, who's responsible at Lufthansa for the global commercial job on agriculture and food, who also can explain a little bit how it works from an airline perspective. And I think that especially now, maybe you can also ask him some questions that are more relevant to the industry and how it works, and hopefully he can answer them.
Thanks, Panalpina, for inviting me and allowing me a couple of minutes on the stage. The topic of volumetric cargo is a topic that in Kenya, of course, is now a big topic, because it's a change to the normal behavior that we all had. I heard Colin and Quinn saying to you people that this is a way of us airlines to get back to you for the last 10 years, where buyers were in the driving seat and we as airlines were not. Actually, I think that's only partly true. Of course, we as airlines, and I'm speaking for Lufthansa, but I think I'm at liberty to also talk for other airlines, we like to make money when the opportunity arises. At the same time, for me, being in perishables, optimization of our cargo flights, for instance, here from Nairobi into Amsterdam, also gives us an argument towards the other more financially interesting routes to maintain this schedule. So why the volumetric? An airplane, whether it's an MD-11 or a 777 freighter or a 747 freighter, has a restricted amount of cubic meters of capacity that we can load. At the same time, it also has a restricted amount of kilos you can put into the airplane for the distance you need to fly. And this is where we need to find an optimum. The question came by that if you go to the internet, you can see 1:6 weight volume ratios, or even 1:5. The 1:6 is the density factor that goes for all air freight. In the International Aviation Association, IATA, the 1:6 volume ratio is set for all types of air freight. This is considered to be sort of an optimum volume versus weight factor that in normal airplanes balances out volume against weight in an optimum. Now, if you would be able to deliver more density, the 1:6 means that 1,000 kilos of weight takes up 6 cubic meters of space in my airplane. If you would be able to give me cargo that instead of the 6 cubic meters gives me 5, it might be an incentive for me as an airline to load more kilos on the plane in the same capacity, making it therefore more attractive. In the flower business, however, the opposite is more the case, where the volume ratio is more like 1:8, so 1,000 kilo of flowers will take up 8 cubic meters in the airplane. This means that if I load here out of Kenya a full freighter with flowers, instead of the 90 tons capacity the aircraft can technically carry back to Europe, I can only load 70 tons. And this 20 tons of capacity I cannot use, in the comparison with a flight to China or to the US, needs to be compensated. And this is why the volumetric weight structure now also here in Kenya is being enforced, so we get every kilo paid. This is causing some hardship. I understand, and we're trying to be flexible in a sense that we want to understand your pain, but jointly we have to come to a method of optimizing packaging, palletization of the skids that the flowers are on, but also on our own aircraft pallets to make sure that we get this ratio to the best level. And this is not just to make more money as an airline, but most predominantly for myself, to make sure that we can maintain the schedules, and the freighter carriers will be here in Kenya, not only today, but also next year and also in 5 years, when the forces in Asia are going to be even stronger, pooling our networks to the high yield markets. So having said that, I hope I can convince you a little bit that it's actually not the Panalpinas of this world forcing this upon you. I take full responsibility on behalf of the global airline associations to bring this up on you, but it is something that we need to tackle if we want to make sure that there is capacity out of Kenya in the next years as well. Also for myself goes, I have a little bit of experience in the airline world, so if somebody has technical questions about volumetric, how does it work, what is pivot weights on a pallet, how much kilos does a normal lower deck pallet carry, how much can I get on the main deck, what is the difference between a lower deck and a main deck, what is the difference between a 747 or an MD-11, feel free to ask any questions you have, because hopefully I can answer them. So, any questions from any of you in this stage, or otherwise in any kind of coffee break or later?
Tell us something about the minimum weights on a pallet.
The minimum weights on a pallet. This is actually something quite simple and quite related to this 1:6 density ratio. The 1:6 density ratio means 1,000 kilos of cargo can take up to 6 cubic meters. With the volume of one main deck pallet in a freighter airplane being roughly 15 cubic meters, you come down to a minimum weight, a chargeable weight, a payable weight of about 2.5 tons per pallet. That varies a little bit by aircraft type. An MD-11 has a different contour than a 747 or a 777, but based on this simple calculation that 1,000 kilos should be 6 cubic meters, every one of you can make quite a simple calculation that 15 cubic meters should then be paying roughly 2.5 tons or 2,500 kilos.
What if it's less?
If it is less, the airline will enforce chargeable weight to the freight forwarder. That means that if the physical weight on the pallet is 2,000 kilos, we will invoice the freight forwarder for 2,500, for instance.
So again, I say if it's less, instead of being like 2.5, it's 2, okay, I understand. So you charge like on extra.
We charge the minimum weight on a pallet, the 2,500 as just a ballpark figure.
Right.
We with the MD-11, we can charge slightly less because the pallets have little less volume. We would charge the 2,500 kilos. If you would be able to find a mix in different types of flowers, in different packaging, bringing the weight up from the 2,500 kilos we can load on the pallet to potentially 2,750 or 3,000, I'm always willing to negotiate better terms of transport and make Panalpina and there with you benefit from the fact that I get more kilos in my head.
And can it be balanced, as you say, with like vegetables, peas, greens, which are extremely heavy, but they're not connected to the same shippers, to the same growers. Eventually everything is dumped on Panalpina. So Panalpina will make a whole, I don't know what, like, sum of the whole weight, and then divided by the number of pallets it has.
Yeah.
Is this something which is applicable? Does it work that way?
It can do. I mean, if you look at general cargo, definitely you look for a blend of boxes. So books versus, I don't know, something that's volumetric, and you balance the pallet out.
Kilos.
Yeah. So the problem is, at the moment, the carriers on the perishable side has a defined flower pallet and a defined vegetable pallet. And at the moment, in their mindset, never the two shall meet, because there's a possibility of managing the volumetric with the density of produce. And it's something that we're active at looking at. But again, what I said, it's prudent, this slide. We've got to work on this together, and I think it's a very good question. But we as an industry, you know, our success is measured by your success. your failure is our failure. And if you look at the way flowers are shipped, and you look at the cargo light box, for instance, we have to get clever on filling those boxes out. Now is when air is costing you money, literally. And by removing that, the air in a box, we used to, years and years ago, going back to the heady days, we used to ship spring onions from Los Angeles and Mexico in ice. And they were in the days when we were charged a pallet rate, it didn't matter. Gradually, and while we're going back 10 years, 15 years, gradually it then started coming whichever the heavy is. So actual weight versus volume rate. Now we don't use any ice at all. We've got better in cool control on how that product is managed. If you look at from a vegetable grower, yes, the product is definitely denser than flowers, but the problem is a lot of the product now is becoming pre-packed. You have pre-packed, if it's not shrinked, pre-pack or vacuum pack, you're moving air again. So it's up to all of us to actually work together, because we want Kenya to be successful. Whether my prediction is whether it's going to China or whether it's still going to go into traditional markets, we have to work as an industry to actually solve these problems. And I asked a question many, many times, years and years ago, who is the most important part of a supply chain? Is it the grower? Is it the consumer? Is it the receiver? Is it the retailer? Or is it somebody like the carrier? And the truth is, without the carriers, none of us would be here. We have to support the best way we can, put our defence up, but we have to work closely, and this is why we invited Walter, because Walter is very, very, I can't pronounce his name, it's a Dutch name, so I apologise. But it's better than me calling you Brian.
However, in this industry
Can I call you Brian?
Bob.
Bob.
Let's go for Bob.
I'm going to call him Bob now. But Bob is very proactive with us and with you guys. As he said, you're free to ask him questions. Have we got anything as an organisation to hide? No, that's why we've invited a carrier here. Because they want to protect the business as well. Because at the end of the day, potentially they could charge whatever they want. But at some price point, you guys won't ship. So there is a compromise. And yes, the rules have changed in Kenya. They've changed many, many years ago, I repeat. If you look at South America, the Colombian flower production and the Ecuadorian flower production has been dealing with this for years and years and years. So we have to get clever, and if that means changing the way we box flowers, if that means that ultimately we can blend freight together, but you have to also understand the complications of blending freight, because it creates a delay. So when something arrives at destination, yes, you can break that pallet down, but by default, there's a time factor. So again, we have to manage that. Is it impossible? Absolutely not. The solution is going to be found in this room by everybody talking, because we're all going to face the same issues. I'll hand it back to you, Bob.
Yeah, so, any other questions from the floor on this stage? Because I was handed back the microphone, so I would be more than happy to answer one or two or three more questions. But if not, then I think Jeroen?
Thank you. Give me a few minutes. I'll just need to switch on laptops. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, very welcome. Let me just put it on. Panalpina, thank you very much for the opportunity to work together with you guys here. And that's the presentation coming. We've chosen for a workshop session, but we felt that it was worthwhile to show a few slides and show what's going on in Kenya's flower supply chain. I think that the volumetric weight coming, it might be a blessing in disguise. I think it might be quite a strong opportunity that we have coming. I would also look at having the past 10 years not having been charged on volumetric weight is also an inefficiency that we allow to exist. So I like to work on the title Opportunities in Kenya's Flower Supply Chain in Optimizing Packaging, Creating Efficiencies. And there's two parts. A practical workshop. You've seen boxes, flowers, tape on the ground. I'll take you through the practical parts after this first one. I'll use about 30 minutes to take you through some slides. We go for coffee, we come back, and then we like to split in 3 groups, trying to fit out how to fit boxes on aircraft pallets, how to double layer bunch flowers, and how to see can we get a few kilos extra in a box. But maybe as a kickoff, I'll flip through different slides, but box issues throughout the chain. And maybe just to show you here some background information, not complete, not having the ambition to do everything here. I think this is quite a complicated task that we are facing, but the opportunity at the end is quite big. I think this is about corrugated board construction. It's about putting corrugated paper together with a single face board and put some glue in between. And then we have single wall boards or 3-ply cardboard and 5-ply cardboard. I think when I've just been to Ecuador the other week and going around the Dutch market picking up samples, and the South Americans being known for their high quality boxes. I'm just trying to put my samples together. Just to pass it around here. All Kenyan standard is a 5-ply bottom with a 3-ply cover. And for me, knowing the market on the European side, the Russian side, the Japanese side, looking at their boxes up on arrival, we have quite a big job ahead of us. I think if Kenya goes down one step further in packaging quality, we do end up wrapping more flowers in newspapers. Going around farms in South America, 3-ply is the standard. It was, for me, just for us to go up. We even have some farms now moving to 5-ply, 5-ply. Going around, their boxes, their bottoms and their covers are all 3-ply. So they have less material used in the box, probably with better quality material, probably with a better quality production process. And still the idea of a collapsed Ecuador box upon arrival on the market is sort of unknown. So this is an example of a 3-ply box, 3-ply board, 5-ply board. Well, we might go up to 7-ply board, but I think that will be a bit expensive. And how about our SFK? I think in Kenya we might perceive that SFK needs to absorb moisture, but I think SFK is there to protect from damages. Forget about the moisture, it needs to be strong to protect from damages. And I think this is where we have to agree with the industry together. Are we there moisture absorption, or are we there protection from damages? I think that is something that, having been in Colombia the other week, this was their normal box, and I'll as soon as this part is over, come and feel the boxes. This is normal box, and everything is direct market, so the owner of the farm is in direct contact with the customer, and the customer just says, your boxes are collapsing. The first thing, and this is a real macho country, the cardboard manufacturer puts a caja book on the market. It's a whole box. And just come and feel the difference later on. one of the five papers is absorbing moisture, losing its strength during the transport, and the other is strong as a brick, strong as a rock. About box design, this is our current cover with a bottom in a cover. But why are we stuck to this method of having a full cover all the way around? Can't we look at a smaller cover? Again, saving a bit of weight, saving a bit of materials. And I think this is not only about our financial situation, I think this is also about our sustainability of our industry. I think one thing that we have overlooked as an industry, vegetables boxes are designed such that they ventilate. And that's because vegetables are a living, respirating, heat-producing product. So every box, if we put beams on top of each other, there's always half a centimeter of air in between, taking out the heat naturally produced by the flowers. I think the boxes that our forefathers chose 30 years ago, it's probably the worst type of box, and we might just have copied the boxes from the Netherlands auctions. There's boxes without any air circulation, without any ventilation, so we always have a heat build-up. And then all flowers are respirating, heat producing about 5 times higher than vegetables. And I think this is stuff that we don't have to invent ourselves. Let's look at all neighbors in vegetables, and we can just make this step. Another thing is the strength of the box is in the corners. It's never the sides, it's never the walls. The walls do a little bit, never in the center. But let's say 70–80% of the strength is in the corners. Then, having a look how we treat the corners of our boxes, go around the industry and we find flaps to the short side, flaps to the long side. What is better for the strength of the corners? We see boxes taped together, stitched together, glued together, stapled together. What are the right standards for putting the box strongly together? But one thing, if you don't put the corners of your box tight together, there's a bit of flexibility in the joint, 30% of the strength of your box is lost. Our current solution, let's specify the boxes by 30–60%. Go to this 5-ply box. I would say let's work together throughout the supply chain on getting things done right. And there's a few more examples. We need to have strong, rigid corners. And just look what's happening here. It's just taken on the airport. Flaps folding out, flaps, walls leaning out. And I think this is where we need to do a better job. A staple here, a bit of glue there. Try and find the best solution. Rigid corners is what we need for the boxes. And then different box dimensions. How can we build a pallet efficient? And I think it's also, let's try and answer it at the practical part of the workshop. With all those different box dimensions, certain freight forwarders will tell there's about 30 different standard boxes already, let alone with all the new dimensions that we see, a few centimeters wider, higher, longer. Just try to put it together, and it's like a Dutch cheese, holes everywhere, and we're paying the airline to transport holes. And I think while they make money out of it, it's money that is wasted in the supply chain between us. Compression strength. Compression strength is in the corners, and therefore we have to align the corners. At the farm, at the forwarder, and even especially at the far end of the supply chain. And currently, all those little things are not adding up together, and therefore we're only specifying our boxes. We're leaving an inefficiency to exist. Column stacking and interlock stacking boxes. I would like to set our ambitions high, and let's see that we work with the best and most professional manufacturers. We work with a 3-ply box. We work at maintaining box integrity all through the supply chain, and we work with the freight forwarder, not on the interlocking stacking, which we do need because of the 5, 6, 7 potholes between the freight forwarders and airside. It's to maintain the stability of the aircraft pallet. I would like to go for interlocking stacking. I think that is where we need to have a better box coming from the manufacturer. At the farm, we need to maintain box integrity all the way. And I think that this is where, if we get that done, then let's column stack the boxes. It's about 40–50% more strength from the same box, the same material. And I think it's a saving that's there to be picked up if we work together as professionals. I think this is where, if the manufacturer, the farm, and the forwarder are working together, if we have the wrong type of truck in between, and someone in the Nakuru is producing fantastic trucks, and someone in the Nakuru is producing trucks that I would call box destroyers. Go back to your farm and check the truck body. Is it a box destroyer, or is it a perfect maintaining truck, maintaining box integrity? Just trying to show off, this is a 3-meter high pallet, and just these boxes on the bottom, they left Kenya being 20 centimeters high, they arrive at the market being 10, 15 centimeters high. And I think this is a consistent issue. The 3 boxes on every corner are more likely to be collapsed than to arrive intact. And I think this is not about trying to find corrective actions. I think this is take the cause away. Let's work on column stacking. Let's work on better boxes, better material, and let's not save on staples or glue or and change to tape. Let's work together and get things done right all the way through. I think this is another thing. We pack the boxes, we put them on a skid, and as our boxes might be 50 by 100, call it a Zim box, and we just got a load of supplies from Netherlands in a container on a Euro pallet. Just try and figure out how your boxes are put on that pallet. But be ready, if there's a bit of overhang from the box, the corrugation, which gives the box strength, is disintegrated. We lose easily 2-inch overhang, 40% of the strength of that box lost. Just imagine that it's put in the corner of the aircraft pallet, that the aircraft pallet takes up, stops for refueling, takes up, takes off again, arrives somewhere in the market, and then we have to stack it on an auction trolley, a Danish trolley, a block pallet or a Euro pallet. Every time we crumble the box integrity, we're losing strength. And I think this is 20 to 40% of the strength of the box maintained by working together, by having an efficient pallet size in the farm, in the truck, and on the airport. Just giving you some examples. Boxes handled throughout the supply chain. This is not to point out to anyone, but as an example, we have a Zim box, and we will have a award ready. Who can make a Zim box fit on an aircraft pallet? We've taken the sizes of an aircraft pallet on the ground there. If someone can make it fit,
Nobel Prize.
Sorry?
He gets the Nobel Prize.
He gets a Nobel Prize. Yeah, I'm quite sure that we can spend 5 days here in a full week, and we won't be able to find it. But this is a Zim box of 50 by 20 squeezed in a hole of 40 by 20. And it's either accepting a big hole and a huge inefficiency, or we make the boxes fit. But look at the pallets on the bottom. There's internal overhang, there's external overhang. We have to align the corners. Because this is just 2 centimeters overhang, 40% of that box lost. We have overhang and overhang and overhang. And I think this is, let's see if we can work on a box that we pack, we palletize on the farm. Humidity. Store your boxes are a perishable product. Buy them at the start of the rain season, store them over the rain season, and not even, let's say, maybe if 80%, 90% humidity in a rainy season, 30 to 50% of the box strength is lost if you store it over a period of, let's say, 2-3 weeks. And I think this is where all competitors in Ecuador, they build their pack shed, they put a slab of concrete next to their pack shed, and put a closed-off greenhouse bay on top of it. The sun heats up the concrete in the cardboard during the day, flowers stay warm, and we keep humidity low, and we keep your cardboard fresh. We're in the business of producing and shipping perishables, but all cardboard is as perishable as all flowers. I think with this we're just touching on maybe 10-15% of what we need to achieve working together on completely. But I think that boxes are perishable. Over time they absorb moisture, we need to look after them. We need to have first in, first out system, humidity control. We need to specify, as the first thing is, if you look into how to pack perishable, the first demand is moisture resistant cardboard. I think that is maybe an answer for one of the packaging suppliers. What percentage of all boxes produced in Kenya meets the requirement moisture resistant? And I think it might be less than 10% which meets this requirement. And 15 years ago, when 90% of the business was auction supplies, it didn't matter. Your boxes arrived in the Netherlands, they were unpacked upon arrival, and the box was thrown away. But now we need to have a box that is ready to go from Amsterdam into Scandinavia, into Eastern Europe. It needs to travel another 2,000 kilometers. We need to have a box quite soon that is ready for web trading. It needs to be able to travel the last mile. And another thing that is setting far higher demands on more boxes than ever before. But if we have these better boxes coming, we must make sure that throughout the supply chain we're not sacrificing box integrity. Just looking at issues with volumetric weight, I think all competitors from South America, all the roses they produce, I would say that 90–95% of the roses leave the country as a double layer or a staggered layer bunch. And I'd just like to see who's been in the industry for more than 15 years. More than 15 years in the flower industry. Sharif? Conrad? Yeah, Peter? Okay, 6–7 people. I think the percentage of flowers leaving Kenya, staggered layer or double layer bunched, up to 2000, 2001, I think everything except the 35 centimeters was sent out as a double layer bunch. And then some smart Dutch buyer thought, I'm running this cash and carry in Germany. I have my expensive Dutch produced roses, single layer bunch on one side of my cash and carry, and I have this imported roses, which was at that time a bit of a negative sound, double layer bunches on the other side of the cash and carry. All he did was to buy the flowers, rebunch them, regrade them, and all of a sudden he simply bought Kenyan roses, double layers, moved to the expensive corner of the cash and carry, and he was making 6 to 10 cents of a guilder, let's say 5 cents of a euro, by pulling this trick. Quite soon the auctions realized TFA was the first one to start regrading Kenyan roses. So grower paid 1 or 2 cents of a guilder, additional price, extra money made in the auction, about 6 cents of a guilder. So we were in business. So all of a sudden the importers set up all their regrading machines to get rid of this staggered layer bunching and to get into single layer bunching. So there was money. Then the euro came, it strengthened a bit, the dollar weakened, and all of a sudden, instead of paying the Dutch importers to regrade, it became quite interesting to sacrifice some of our volumetric weight and get all bunches single layer into the Netherlands, avoiding the need to regrade. That was one reason. Then quality controllers, as the business grew and as all coaching got out of control, buyers in the market were a bit suspicious about buying double layered roses, because the second layer, wrapped in the foliage in the sleeve of the others, was more susceptible to botrytis. As temperatures go up, humidity went up, and all of a sudden we had a cookbook recipe for botrytis. It was another reason why buyers developed a preference for single layer bunches. Then retail became in masses, and people changed from auction market to direct market, and again, another 3, 4, 5 reasons for going from double layer bunching into single layer bunching. But I would like to put the challenge the other way around. Now competing in the Russian market for the business of the Russians, if you ask the Russians what do you like about Kenyan flowers, the first reply is fantastic quality. The second thing is, what else do you like about Kenyan roses? And they say price. It's much cheaper than the Ecuador product. Can we have a Champions League of Kenyan growers with excellent product, with excellent packing, and just make sure that in the Russian cash and carry, we move your flowers not in the Juakari type of Kenyan box, but into a very professional Ecuador style box with double layer bunching, and hopefully get Ecuador prices for Kenyan roses. And I think we should be very competitive there. Any questions there on staggered layer, double layer bunching versus single layer?